Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby-peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Yeah, maybe akin to like a horrible day at the dentist, something like that. Probably worse though. Hello and welcome to The Nest. How would you equate a day at the footy like that, Drew Jones? It's as bad as we've seen from the Eagles in some time. You had to endure it in the outer Academia Park, and it's as bad a life experience as you can have when it comes to sport, I reckon.
Yeah, it's not great, Garby, that's for sure, especially when you've travelled an hour and 15 minutes down the highway. Yeah, it was raining, cold. It was really as we described it in the lead up. But, it was hard yakka, Garby. I think it's one of the only times in my life where I've felt let down by the Eagles. And, that is a feeling that I've almost never had. And maybe part of it is a little bit selfish because of the lockdown. I hadn't flown to Perth that day, so I sort of went to Geelong on a little bit of a whim. And there was a part of me that thought, maybe everything happens for a reason here. Like, I'm not going to go to Perth, but maybe I'll see one of the great West Coast smash and grab wins. Bunch of good players out. Can we grind something out against a good Geelong team who's way out of form?
We started well.
Yeah, and early signs were good. Mark Blitzarv's hilariously kicking the ball backwards over someone's head and Brander kicking a goal. At 3-1, I thought, we're looking okay. But the game was on even terms.
Yeah. We
certainly didn't see that coming. It was flattening. I stayed the whole 4 quarters, you'll be happy to know.
That's good to know. You were more committed than some of the players then.
Maybe it was just saving myself the embarrassment of having to walk out the stadium and walk past all those Cats fans. But it was brutal. What did you see on TV?
Oh, I mean, it was horrible. It was like, that feeling when you're sitting in like an exam at school, like, I don't know, for your TEE, people in Perth will remember that. And you actually have no idea what on earth you're reading in front of you. It's like that painful experience, like that torturous experience. Like, I don't know any of these answers and I've got to find a way to get through this test. It was like, once the second quarter wave started, you're like, how do we sit through the rest of this? Because this is only going one way. I mean, there was no feeling of 2006 and inspiring a comeback, because it just appeared to me, unfortunately, as great as this team has been and as much joy as they've given us, since the flag, there is a bit of a soft underbelly there and there is a bit of a weak mentality at times. And when the going gets tough, we can go to water. And it was always going to be tough. It's Academia Park. We discussed it. It's not going to be easy ever. And when the wave started in the second quarter, yes, Gov goes off and there's big players out, but they down tools. Like, they really did. And then they tried for because Simo probably gave them an absolute rev up and gave them some home truths and all that, and probably embarrassed a few of them as he should have. And so they tried to fight it out for a half, but just didn't have the class. But that second quarter, they actually just stopped and went, this is all too hard. And they're too good and there's too much going against us. And sometimes, we discussed it. I think we had some really good points last week discussing, are there enough people who are willing in that group to really put the wind up each other? And I just think they can be too nice and too comfortable at times, and especially when the going gets tough. And that's what appeared to me like momentum with Geelong, Academia Park. Nah, too hard, boys. Too hard. And you just stop and just let them just run over you.
It's actually a little bit eerie that we had that discussion last week, because it really did come to the forefront on Saturday. losing McGovern behind the ball, and he had been pretty good for that first quarter and a half. That clearly had a massive impact on us in terms of the way we structured up defensively. But it's all well and good you can structure up in the back line as well as you want. But if you can't move the ball past your own half back line, then I'm not sure what hope you've got anyway. And time and again, we either completely muffed the kick or had absolutely no options. Like the amount of times players got caught holding the ball, like it was embarrassing that kept happening. But I imagine it was because they had absolutely no one to kick to, or no idea where to go. Is it the narrowness of the ground? Were we too condensed? Like the ground just can't be that foreign. Like we weren't rocking up at away days playing in Perth Amos back in the day, Garby, and not knowing where to kick the ball because the ground was different.
Adam Simpson said before the game, he's not worried about that stuff as much. He said in the past, he's worried too much about that on certain away grounds. He said it in the interview on Fox. So he's worried a bit too much about, the minute details of a game and that sort of stuff. And he's like, no, away from home, he basically said we've got to get back to basics, and it's about the contest. And if we attack the ball ferociously, our quality will take over and overcome a different dimension ground-wise. But the attack just went to water in the second quarter and then just carried on from there. And his comments afterwards were interesting. I don't think he's in his tenure, and it probably makes sense because he hasn't had a loss of that nature in his tenure. I don't think he's hit out at the team in that way in public, calling it embarrassing and no excuses. And, the minute COVID was mentioned in the press conference, no excuses. That was just unforgivable, not good enough. Basically apologising to the fans. What did you make of his comments and the way he handled the presser?
I'm not sure if I've ever heard a coach use the word weak about their team in a press conference ever. So I thought that was telling. And, as we know, he sticks up for the players almost every opportunity he gets. So he must have been so disappointed. And maybe, he potentially was quite embarrassed because, we see ourselves as a premiership contender, and that's how we position ourselves, in the AFL, to sort of serve that up. And, I felt sorry for myself sitting there in the crowd. I actually felt really sorry for every single Western Australian West Coast fan, some of who don't have Foxtel, Garby. So the game was on a delay. So they would have sort of shaped their day locked in at home based around watching the Eagles in the afternoon, really hoping for a good performance. It's not 3 days of lockdown is not the worst thing ever, but it's still not great. And I'm sure word would have filtered through to those people who were waiting to watch it on Channel 7 that you probably shouldn't bother. I felt let down. I'm sure Adam Simpson did. I'm sure most West Coast fans do. And like we normally sit down and pick apart games and we pick out the positives, Garby, and we have negatives as well. I find this game actually quite hard to break down because we were just so bad. Like it was just...
We gave up. Like we literally did give up.
There was a time in the second quarter where we were down by, I think, 19 points. And I said to the guy I was with at the footy, I was like, we're done. It feels like we're down by 12 goals. And it's 6 goals to 3. But they are all over us. And we are going to... we were just getting... Yeah. And you know what? Geelong played well. We were terrible. And then every single bounce went for them. Every single little moment, the Duncan torp, that summed it up. And then straight after halftime, he kicks one with a lucky bounce. Spoils were just landing in their arms. Weird stuff was happening.
But that happens when one team runs harder than another.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. It happens to us a lot in Perth because we generally run harder in those circumstances. And, I've been pretty sensitive about, or defensive is the right word, about the flat track bullies slogan that gets applied to us because we have won a lot in Melbourne in recent times. We won a flag there. And I think we put in some good performances there. We just haven't got over the line. And home teams do usually play better. But you know what? Now you can't deny it. When you look at that, and it's not so much playing away from home. That's not the point. It's not so much playing away from home. It's when the going gets tough. That's when we become a flat track bully side, because when the going gets tough, we don't want to respond enough. When St Kilda got on top of us, we didn't want to fight back. That's the problem. We don't know how to stop momentum in games at the moment. And we have these mental lapses. And that's where the flat track bully tag, I think, is permissible, because when it's easy, it's fine. And when it's tough, we're not up there with the best anymore. And that's why we're not a contender. I don't think we are a flag contender, because I don't think we have, with all our injuries at the moment, and things can change, but I don't think we have the mental toughness as it stands. That can change because we've proven it before. But at the moment, that's the question mark I've got on the team, unfortunately.
Yeah, West Coast remind me of a mid-2000s English test batsman who makes a bunch of runs in like an English summer against the West Indies, and then he comes out to Australia in the Ashes and he gets like 12 runs in the first 6 knocks and gets dropped. Great in our own conditions, great when it's going our way. You know, Jimmy Anderson's out there taking wickets and then you come into bat and you look $1 million, all well and good, downhill skiing. But when, away from home, when the challenge was thrown down by Geelong. But that doesn't mean...
We had Travis Head. We're Travis Head, if you want to use a cricket analogy. Like when we're playing Pakistan at home, we'll score 100. Yeah. But if you're going to play us against England or India, we're going to be found out.
At least Travis Head digs in and fucking grits things out. Like, we don't do that at all. I don't know.
Maybe he toughs it out a bit.
We need, seriously, Garby, we need Luke Shuey back so freaking badly. It's unbelievable. And we need Yo to come back and hit the ground running. We need Hurn back. We need some leadership. Like, God, it's insane.
The leadership is a big issue, and it's those players. We've been pretty hard, and I think it's warranted, but we are missing some big players. But, we need the leaders back, because that is a problem in the team. And I think it needs to be addressed within the 4 walls. Like, someone's going to put the wind up guys in games. And it's not so much when we're losing. It's like, the last quarter against Port, allowing them to get back into the game. Now, someone's got to put in the hard words like we discussed last week, so that when the going gets tough away to Geelong at Godinia Park, you know how to react and you know what's acceptable. So, that leadership is certainly warranted. Look, some of the big names, unfortunately, just aren't performing. And we've spoken about the midfield, and in the big games and against the big teams, our midfield needs to be at 100%, because we, missing Shuey and Yo, it's too hard to compensate. And I know Gaff had 27 disposals or whatever, but I thought he was really ordinary. The same with Liam Duggan. That's the worst game I think he's played in the season in a bit. Nothing seemed to work for him. Jack Redden was the only... Dom Sheed looked like he downed tools on a few occasions, just it got a bit too hard for him. Jack Redden was the only one on the ball that was trying, and Nick Nat. And Nick Nat maybe had his colours lowered, but he was putting in an effort, and Jack Redden was. And the rest of them, I think Gaffey was trying, but I still think he's got something wrong with him, which is stopping him from running at his best. And the others, it just got a little bit too hard basket.
Duggan's game was comical. Like he got 10 possessions, and every time he got the ball, he either turned it over or had it smothered off the boot. His defending was poor when he was back there. It was a real step backwards for him. I mean, he's allowed to have a bad day. As, they're all allowed to have bad days at some stage. I thought O'Connor did a pretty good job on Kelly.
Another example, work through the tag a bit more.
Yeah. Or someone go in there and, give him a hand. Yeah. That was... None of the big names really stood up. I mean, we haven't got to the positives yet. We'll get to that in a second. Tell you what I noticed, Garby, it was interesting watching live. I haven't seen much of Xavier O'Neill live. Yeah. It was a little early in the game. There was a little bit of Luke Shuey about the way he was moving. Something about him, I was enjoying his work early. He badly drifted out of the game like we all did. But I liked what I saw early. I know it's only a quarter, but as far as O'Neill's work, not too bad. You mentioned it on Twitter. I think I was too afraid to get on my phone and look at what was going on online. But Jack Darling was immense.
Yeah.
He's in a game fantastic. In a game where we were getting absolutely smoked, he really held up his end of the bargain. So that was good to see. I mean, he's having a great season. And hasn't necessarily stood out the most in games that we've won. But yesterday, we saw the consistency that he's producing week in, week out was, if we didn't have him ahead of the ball, we would have been in all sorts of trouble.
And it's so hard to play that role at Kardinia Park when your team's getting smashed. Yet he kept presenting and took some good marks, and he led, and there weren't too many others with him. I thought Tommy Barrass tried hard up against quality players as well. And Jeremy Cameron obviously makes the difference. They got the last two Coleman medalists in their forward line. So it's pretty tough when the midfield's just not putting up any resistance whatsoever to deal with that. But I thought he tried really hard, so fair play. And as I said, I thought, Jack Redden put in an effort, which is more than you can say for a lot of them. There weren't too many positives. Let's get to the votes though, because we've got to do them. You can't just send the 5-4-3-2-1 when we have a nice win over Carlton at Optus by 47 points and the world feels great. You've got to show up as well when it's a tough one. So thankfully, most people have done that. Good on you. And it allows us to keep the Nest medal consistent. So I'll give you my votes, Drewy. I gave Darling 5, obviously. I gave Jack Redden 4. I thought he worked hard. He was the one midfielder when there was a tsunami against him who seemed to put his head over the ball and get into some contests. Barrass 3. I thought Natanui tried hard, beaten, but he tried to get the ball out of the middle and work it forward for us as much as he could. And I actually gave Jamie Cripps 1. I know that he's copped a bit on Twitter. A lot of people are bagging him, but watching the game at home, I thought he was one player who was trying. He tried to lay tackles. He tried to chase. And to be honest, there weren't too many others who were challenging him for a vote. So I've gave Cripple 1. I thought at least his work ethic was up to standard.
I think he got 2 hits in the ribs as well. So he was playing a bit sore. So I gave 5 to Jack, 4 to Tom Barrass, 3 to Oscar, who I know you didn't end up giving votes to, I don't think, but I thought he presented well. He tried to keep himself in the game. I thought he tried hard. Brander, I gave 2, liked his game, particularly early. He kept sort of digging in through the game out in the wing. And I gave 1 to Alex Witherden. It probably didn't really suit him. Like, it's not his game when you're under the cosh so much. You can't really do what he does best, but he didn't let anyone down with his defensive work, I didn't think. I didn't think that Redden played that well, but I'm definitely willing to hear the case for it. Maybe it was because he'd played so well the week before. I was expecting a bit more from him. And so, Garby, worth noting here that McGovern is going to get a vote in the Nest medal, even though he only played a quarter and a half.
That sums it up better than anything. Maybe that's people just trying to be humorous, that they're going to give Gov a vote because, he copped an injury in a game that we were embarrassing in. So we'll give him 1 for that as compensation. That's hilarious. Jeremy McGovern gets a vote in a quarter and a half. Wow. Give us the rest of the 5-4-3-2-1, Drewy, from our listener submissions.
Yeah, so McGovern gets 1. Now, a few people gave reasoning for this, Garby. They said that if you look at what he did in a quarter and a half and you equate it to a whole game, he was sort of on target to have about 15 intercept marks and 30 possessions. So he was certainly influential. And I just think, we noticed his absence, that after he went out of the game, I think they kicked, 14 goals to 2 or something. So Brander gets 2, Oscar Allen 3, Tom Barrass 4, and Jack Darling deservedly gets the 5. So where does that leave us on the overall tally?
Well, that means that Tommy Barrass has caught Oscar Allen. So we have a tie for the lead, Oscar and Tommy Barrass on 13. And Jackie Darling, all of a sudden, we've been talking in the first 5-6 weeks about him not getting enough credit for his performances. He's now level with Nick Natanui on 8 votes in the Nest medal after his 5. So Oscar Allen on 13, Barrass on 13, Natanui and Darling both on 8. And then Tim Kelly on 7, Sheed, Petrocelli, Luke Shuey all on 5. So Oscar Allen and Barrass lead, and now Jack Darling joins the top echelon, which is probably where he deserves to be based on his season so far.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, Garby, before we move on, I've got a couple of things to throw at you. I want to ask you a couple of things. Is this the type of result that you feel we now should be readjusting our expectations?
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, as it stands, and that's an easy out to give yourself because the team is experienced enough and has got enough runs on the board that they can adjust. And maybe it's a line in the sand moment that leads to them changing their ways mentally. And that can happen to a team. We probably saw it with Geelong in 2006 when we had that comeback. Look at them after that. That was their line in the sand game, they say, where they hit rock bottom and rebuilt. Okay, we haven't hit rock bottom now because we're still 3-3 and this is a team that's won a flag. But maybe that's the time where they go, hang on, you know what, boys? We've tried to have a bit of bravado about us when people have criticised us for being flat track bullies. Maybe there's some truth in it. And maybe we need to realise that we're a little bit soft in certain situations. And players will come back and that will help. But as it stands right now, we're not a contender. Like, we're not. There's too many teams that are in the league for us to be considered one. Port, Brisbane, Geelong, Richmond, Melbourne, and I'm forgetting one.
Port.
Did I mention Port? So Port. There's 6.
Yeah.
So there's 6. So we can't be classified as a contender when you're looking at all those teams and the way they've started this season.
So it is interesting. The glimmer of hope that I have, and my expectations have been wound back after that goal. So after that game. So the Port Adelaide game lifted my expectations. This game has probably wound them back a little bit. So the next 6 games on our fixture, and that's how far ahead I've looked, are all very winnable. So if you look at our draw at the start of the season, there's a chance that we're 3-3. If you look at the draw at the start of the season,
that's what I thought.
So that's the glimmer of hope, right? Our next 3 away games, Garby, we've got Hawthorn at the MCG, a game we should win. We've got GWS in Sydney, which will be a tough game, but the GWS have moved into a different phase of their, they're not in the premiership window anymore. So it's a winnable game. And then we've got Carlton at the MCG. So we're playing 3 teams that won't make the top 8 away from home. And that is normally the key to success and getting a top 4 spot is playing good teams at home and playing average teams away, because winning away against top 8 and top 4 teams is very difficult. So in that time, our home games are Fremantle, Essendon and Adelaide. So there's 6 potentially winnable games for us. The big caveat is we've still got injuries. And also, do we even think we're favourites against Fremantle this week?
No, I think it's 50-50. And the reason why I'm worried is because of our lack of midfielders weighed up against theirs. We've got a really good midfield, like even without Chera. Fife, obviously. Mundy's up there with the top 5 players in the competition on form this season. Brayshaw, Sarong, they can overpower us in there, unfortunately. And that's our Achilles heel at the moment, is we just don't have the numbers through the middle. So if they do start to do that, then we're in a bit of trouble. I think it's a 50-50 ball game. So, I'm not confident. I'm really not. I think it's going to be a tough game. Kennedy back will make a big difference, of course. Shannon Hurn back makes a difference. The fact that he breaks the record, that should give the boys a bit of a lift. They'd want to do something for him, and the motivation of embarrassing themselves and trying to rectify that this week should be a pretty good stimulus as well for the side. So I think we can win, and I think there's a good chance we win, and I'll probably tip us, but nowhere near as much confidence as there was 7 days ago.
Yeah. No, and Fremantle are playing well. They're playing decent footy. They've got players who are in form. We don't seem like we have many players who are actually in form and playing their best footy right now. So it's going to be a challenge. Now, I'm going to throw a question at you because someone's brought it up in the responses when we put it out to everyone. Give us your thoughts about the game. Before we move on too much to the Fremantle game, we should probably finish things off with Geelong.
Yeah.
So one of the tweets, now let me find it. I think it might even be Candace. They touch on the point that we would just refuse to throw the magnets around, particularly when it comes to the midfield. Is there something we can do this week with the players we have available to do something different through the middle? Can you throw up an idea for us?
To do something different through the middle?
Yeah.
I saw that he put Jermaine Jones in there at one stage. That didn't work. You couldn't get near it. I mean, Liam Ryan would be the one, but he's out. Like throwing him in there to try and just win the footy and get us some clean football through there. I mean, Brander, he seems to be playing with a bit of confidence right now. The big body midfielder, maybe he's one. I mean, we probably do, we'll back Tim Kelly, of course, and we'll back Redden and Sheed. Gaff, confidence is waning at the moment on form. So he's got to look at a couple other options. I'd probably say Jared Brand is the one right now that you look to throw in and hope that his size helps to provide a point of difference.
Would you play Jack Darling in some centre bounces?
When Kennedy's back, yeah, potentially. When Kennedy's back, maybe. I mean, yeah, I remember Jonathan Brown going into the middle at Subi on an occasion when Brisbane played Freo, I think, and he just scared the living daylights out of the Freo midfielders and won it 3 or 4 times. Maybe just for a few bounces just to shake things up a little bit. That's probably fair.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The personnel mix, it worked. It's worked in recent weeks. It just failed and flopped on Saturday. Geez, it makes a difference when Kelly gets tagged out of the game, doesn't it? Like, he could not break out of the O'Connor tag, who's obviously good at the job. But then without Kelly being a prime mover and then a couple of other guys down, it just makes such a huge difference. The numbers there, you start to run thin really quickly. And when you're coming up against Mundy, Fife, Sarong, Chera, Brayshaw, Alistair Clarkson said he thought that Andy Brayshaw had been the best midfielder in the comp in the first 3 weeks. And then David Mundy is playing career best football. He's like 47 years old. It's ridiculous. So a couple of tweets for you, Garby. This one I liked from Ben Tomasini, or Tomasini, I beg your pardon. Said, really average effort across the ground. You can be beaten on skill. You can be beaten by the bounce, but you should never be beaten on intensity and a desire for the contest. And then he poses the question, have we become the Chardonnay sipping club that I guess everyone's said from the outside?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I mean, look, it's one game. It's early in the season, yes, but there's been a trend. That's the problem. If this was one game in isolation, you'd say, all right, a misnomer. But we spoke about it. There's been mental lapses in the last 2 years, and this season already, there's been signs that when it gets tough, we fall apart. So that's the issue, and that all came to a head in that second quarter where we conceded 10 goals, in a quarter for the first time since 2009.
So one from Footyhead, who says this is the counterpoint. Of course, this wasn't the real West Coast. Missing Shuey, Yo, Hurn, Ryan, Kennedy, McGovern for half a game. That's 1,138 games of experience on the sideline. It's very hard to win at GMHBA Stadium at the best of times. No excuses. This is the worst we've played, maybe ever, but we will bounce back. So I tweeted this out after the game, and it got a lot of responses. I said I thought that it was the worst that I'd ever seen a West Coast team play.
Yeah. And
there are counterpoints to that. People talked about 2009 round 2. We lost by 100 points to St Kilda. I don't actually remember that game. But in terms of being at a game live, when you judge the context of the performance in terms of the expectations, the fact that Geelong were, no Dangerfield, bit undermanned, out of form, and we're in the premiership window, I just thought that was as bad as it could get.
From Kevin Seaborn, Jones, Ainsworth, Langdon should be dropped. Bit hard on Ainsworth. He was a medical sub, and give him a spell. Last man in that sort of game, I give him a pass. He says, I remember we got flogged by Essendon in 2018. That didn't mean anything later in the year, of course. We're never going to win with the players we had out. The floodgates open, but I'm not worried. It's all about the response this weekend. That's fair. That's measured. Who goes out, Drewy, just off the back of Kevin's tweet? I've got Waterman out. I think he needs to be dropped. I think he was really poor.
Mm-hmm.
Did not do much. And I thought, I've said it before, I thought he got rushed back too quickly. So Waterman out for me. Jones out. Gov goes out with the injury. And then probably Langdon goes out. I'd have in Edwards. Is Petruccelli back? If he is, he comes in. Yeah. Shannon Hurn comes in.
Yeah.
And then you're looking at one of Isaiah Winder, Ainsworth, or Archie.
Yeah, so I think we have to go with we need something a bit different look. So I don't mind the Archie one if he's fit and ready to go. Just for, I liked what he did last season for most of the year. So I'd be happy to see Archie back in the team for something a little bit different. Jermaine Jones probably needs a spell, even though I do like what he brings. Yeah, I mean, you've been knocking on this Waterman door for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think he should be out.
The question is, do you allow him to sort of play through it and try to get out the other side? Or do you just put him back into the forward six? Like, he's playing out of position. I
think you've got to look at least one player and say, you just didn't play well enough. That's it. Like, we lost by that many points. You just didn't play well enough. You're dropped. There has to be at least one of those. And the problem we get into now when you say Jones, and the Jones, like these guys, it's like you're starting to get into this in for 2 weeks, out for a week, in for 2 weeks, out for a week, which is not what you want to do. But the problem we've got is all our other guys who played poorly have got so many runs on the board. No one's quite there yet to make a big statement selection axing on.
Yeah.
In the next week or two, maybe, but it's not quite there yet, as bad as the weekend was. So I think this week is they all survive and they get the chance to prove themselves. It's a derby. But I think Waterman's one who probably, for mine, shouldn't be playing on the weekend and has to earn his spot.
Yeah, I think Harry Edwards has to play because I think the Dockers are probably going to go with Lobb, Taberner and Tracy, right? So, and then they've, Big Darcy's, pretty good when he goes forward. So I think that Harry Edwards comes in, and I there's big racks on him, so I hope that he comes in and does well. And then you get Hurn back, so he's obviously a big in for our back line. So maybe you go Waterman out for Kennedy. But then you've got to make something work with that front half. Like Langdon and Jones were below par. Of course I
forgot JK. Sorry, he obviously comes in.
Yeah. I'm not loving Langdon with ball in hand.
No, that's an issue. His disposal has been poor. So
he needs to work on that. But I like other elements of his game, but I haven't enjoyed that. So, yeah, there's a few guys on the mend. If Petruccelli's fit and available, that's a really good boost for us because he's coming off a great game against the Saints. So, yeah, it's going to be a very interesting game, that's for sure. Freo have got the momentum. They've got the form. West Coast do have a legit derby home crowd, hopefully in front of a pretty big crowd if all goes well with coming out of lockdown and sort of releasing a few of those restrictions. And we have won the last 10 derbies. So we've got form in that area.
Yeah. And we should lift, of course. This one from Jimmy T. The problems are real. We've been awful in contested possession and pressure all year. It finally caught up to us. No wonder we can't stop any momentum when we can't win the ball at the source. The problems are real. So, we've got differing opinions. Some people who are saying this whole fire, it's one bad game, we'll be okay when we get our players back. And others are saying, no, this is, as we've pointed out, an indication of where we are and we're not contenders as it stands unless we can correct those issues.
Who's the guy that calls in the players to have a bit of a yarn this week?
I'd love it to be Nick Natanui, as I said last week. I think he should be that player. He seems to have enough authority and enough confidence now to be the guy to maybe not be everyone's best friend anymore, not be big friendly Nick and actually have a few people go, geez, that was a bit harsh, who's this bloke all of a sudden? But that's okay. I think he needs to be that kind of guy while McGovern's out and Shuey's out and Yo's out to maybe hammer a few.
I love it when he gets that hard edge about him. It's really good to watch when he's doing it, trying to do it to an opponent in a game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe seeing that against your own teammate might not be such a bad thing. I mean, let's not forget here, he hasn't won a flag.
Yeah.
He should be grabbing some blokes by the scruff of the neck and saying, hang on a sec, I'm glad that you're so happy with yourself after getting a flag in 2018, but not all of us are out there. We've got a good enough team to challenge. Let's start actually moving in the right direction here. And, yeah, I just wonder they talk about, Bob Murphy talks about the circle up, and you probably only get one of them a season where you can bring everyone in and say, all right, we're not going to get any worse than that. We can't get lower than that. Let's buy in. Let's all be 10% more committed at training and through the week. Let's do all the right things from now and give this a real good shake.
Yeah, I mean, we saw in the doco, Simo did it a few times last season. As a coach, there's only so many of those rev ups and whacks you can give a team, because then your voice starts to become tired.
Yeah.
And he's experienced enough now that he can judge when he has to go and when he can't. And I'm sure at halftime he would have delivered some home truths. But yeah, and from a fan's point of view, this would be the kind of week where I hope that Nick Natanui goes to Adam Simpson or another senior player and says, "You don't do it this week. We've got it. We will call the players together. You can put the icing or the cherry on top of the speech if you want, but we actually have to take responsibility for that." You know, that's what I would love as a fan to be happening behind closed doors. But I'm not sure if they've got it in them. That's the doubt. Maybe this will be a moment where that's rectified.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're going to find out a fair bit about the team on Sunday, I think. Like, no one who's been in Perth, it hasn't been easy circumstances for the last few days. So there's no doubt that that interrupts your preparation a little bit. So the way they treat the week and then the performance on Sunday, it'll say a lot about West Coast. There's a fair bit at stake. If you go 3-4, you know, you're chasing your tail for the rest of the year.
Yeah. And if you lose a derby, that becomes another, spirit killer in the West. So it is a massive game in that sense. Hey, let's finish on a positive note. So Shannon Hurn, let's assume he comes back and breaks Dean Cox's record for the most games played ever by a West Coast Eagle. Let's just reflect on this bloke and what he's been for the club and what he means to us and how big of an achievement that is. Because, we've heard for so many years about how tough it is being an Eagle and the flights and so on and so forth. So to break that record, it's not like breaking a record at most other clubs. It's a little bit different when you do it at the Eagles, I think, or or the Dockers, because of the amount of travel that goes on. So it's a really big moment, I think, for the organisation.
Yeah, it's huge. And he's been probably one of the best sort of mid-range draft picks that we've had. And he's been one of the most reliable players that we've had in the modern era. I mean, if you think about when he first slotted into the team, he's really played almost the same way the whole way throughout. He's rarely had a bad game. He's been very durable. He hasn't missed many games over his entire career, despite the travel factor. And if anything, the last couple of weeks have given us a window into life without him, and it looks pretty bleak, to be honest. There's a leadership void that is difficult to fill. Such a professional. Came along at just the right time, don't you reckon? Like, considering what the club had been through with some off-field stuff, that transition from the 2006 Premiership team to, the next iteration of West Coast. He was a big part of that. And because of the way that he conducts himself on and off the field, it made that transition all the easier. So we got a good one from South Australia. He's looked aged 42 since he was aged 18, and he still looks pretty much exactly the same. But lethal kick, very reliable one-on-one defender, great leader, and someone who Adam Simpson would send out every week knowing he's going to follow my instructions to a T and he's going to make sure the rest of the players follow suit.
He's someone that if you played alongside him and you messed up, you'd feel really guilty letting him down. Yeah. He probably wouldn't have a go at you, but you'd feel really guilty. He's just seems like such a great bloke and obviously an ultra professional. So pick 13 in 2003. Both he and Beau Waters, when they were drafted, and you never fully know with draft picks, but when they were both drafted, you knew they would be fine because they came so ready-made for AFL football. They were meant, maybe not Beau, but Shannon Hurn was a man straight away. Yep. Beau was a bit lighter, but he was so tough that you knew he'd be okay. They were two picks that became obviously hallmarks of our half back line. And, people write their greatest West Coast Eagles sides all the time. And there's McKenna, Worsfold, Jakovic, Darren Glass at fullback. Obviously, McGovern's in a pocket somewhere. I've got Shannon Hurn in the other pocket. So my back six is, McKenna, Worsfold, Jakovic, McGovern, Glass, and Shannon Hurn. That's my all-time Eagles back six. So he's in there. Yep. That's how good he's been. And that's tough on an Ashley McIntosh and tough on a Brad Shepherd and tough on a David Wapunda. But he's, especially when you look at this record, which is just unbelievable, he's undoubtedly in our greatest West Coast Eagles side of all time.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, pick 13, I didn't realise we'd got in that high, but even at pick 13, that's an absolute bargain for what we've got from him. And, he lifts that cup in 2018 and he was an integral part of getting us out of the doldrums in 2010 to be a contender a couple of times and then to win a flag in 2018. So he will go down as one of our best defenders ever. And he goes down, maybe no one will ever break that record. It's pretty tough to play 291 games for West Coast, and playing 300, which we'll bring up later in the year, is going to be a magnificent effort. When we celebrated Nathan Jones in Victoria last week. It's only the second Melbourne player ever to do it. And think about, they're almost the oldest football club in the world as far as Aussie rules goes, and they don't have to deal with that. They can play 19 games at the MCG a season. So yeah, it's not easy to get that many under your belt. The average career for an AFL player is 3.5 years. So Hurn's bucked the trend and he's done it really well.
You need to be built like a proverbial brick shithouse from country South Australia to do it.
Yeah.
And that is how Shannon Hurn is built.
God, he's hard. Like, imagine running into Shannon Hurn. It'd be horrible. It'd be like he'd be running into a brick wall.
Like, he's just an absolute beast. And it's been great having him in the team for so long. And we need him now. And we shouldn't need him now. Like, he should be almost a luxury backline player now, right? That we can rest, every 6 weeks or whatever, and he doesn't get the toughest man, but we use his kicking and his leadership and his experience. We need him back in the team for every single reason, for every single strength that he provides. And that's the concerning aspect of the loss on the weekend and where we are right now. But hey, it can all change in a week. And if we put in a big performance against the Dockers, we'll love the win. We'll probably know that, okay, doesn't mean that much because we've shown this season that when the going gets tough, we're a bit of a worry. So let's see how we go on the road and some big games on the road and so on and so forth. But a derby win would be fantastic to get us back on track. So, now that we've had the post-mortem, we can start to get excited over the next few days before Sunday comes around.
Well, that's all we can do now. I mean, I think you've summed it up really well. It's not about getting the season back on track and becoming contenders again in 1 week. It's about playing a lot better, hopefully getting a win under our belts, and then you get the chance to come over to Melbourne again and right a few wrongs. But you can't right those wrongs without getting it right this week. And the fact that it's a Western Derby means, yes, we want to appease everyone who goes into work on the Monday and, can make that snide comment to a Freo fan. We all love doing that. But yeah, we've got to get the process right. And now Candice has already pointed out on Twitter that if I go to the games, we end up losing. But the plan is right now that I will be at the Western Derby on Sunday, which will be my first ever visit to Optus Stadium. So pretty damn excited. So don't let me down, lads.
That is exciting. Do we know about the crowd situation yet after the lockdown in the West?
I don't know at this stage. We are doing a Monday night podcast, so it's very early in the week. But, I mean, there is hope that it could be 100% if they were able to say, yes, the lockdown has worked, we go back to normal. But, 75 to 100, you'd think.
Well, I hope that you get the full crowd experience because Optus is special. The second best stadium in the country for me after a packed MCG. You can't beat that. Mm-hmm. And then it's Optus. And I've been to Adelaide Oval and I've been there when it's packed and I've been to everywhere else. Nothing beats Optus other than the MCG in this country. So enjoy it, mate. And hopefully you're enjoying an Eagles win. Let's hope we can get back on track. These podcasts aren't fun. But as we've said, without fear or favour, we'll analyse the team as we see fit. And we had to this week. And I don't think anyone will think that we went over the top. Maybe a few think we're a little bit harsh considering the players that we have out, but it's other reasons that we spoke of. It's the trend that's an issue. So hopefully that can be rectified in the coming weeks. Hopefully we can just get 4 points on the weekend against the Dockers side that is looking pretty good at the moment, and we can start to feel better about life in the Eagles camp.
It's out of our systems. We now move on. The post-mortem is over. We're 3-3. There's still 16 games to go in the season, which means we can finish 19-3.
You don't need your therapist this week. The nest is all you need just to get over it all, to digest it, and then move on with your day. So thank you for listening, everyone. Thanks for your feedback. We're really enjoying it, and your Nest Medal votes. And fire up for the Derby on Sunday. And let's get passionate again and hope that the Eagles can restore a little bit of pride, which they need to do. Looking forward to it.
Let's go.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby-peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.